Well, that street behind it, I call Tumbleweed, so that kind of fits.
Park and Rec posted that no juvenile is allowed in there without a parent.
Because of the incident in the public?
Well, I would assume it'd be, well, I don't know, I would assume 18 because anything under 18 is juvenile.
Yep. I'm still trying to figure out why you had it.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out why they said it's accidental. Alright, here we go, we ready?
Yep.
We're ready.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start this regular scheduled meeting for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Call to order. Let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I have everyone stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, perfect. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Krushat,
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Here.
Commissioner Walker,
Here.
Vice Chair Dixon,
Here.
and let the record show that Chair Pahana has an excused absence.
All right, perfect. Announcements. These proceedings may be viewed on demand by the City of 29 Palms website at www.29palms.org. You may also live stream this meeting by going on the city website and clicking on the meeting's agenda link. Public comments. This is a time for the public to address the Planning Commission on issues within the jurisdiction of the Commission that are not on the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Chair of the Commission and shall not contain any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. There is a time limitation of 3 minutes per person. If you haven't already done so, please fill out name and address slips and give them to the Planning Commission Secretary. The Planning Commission is prohibited from the Brown Act, state law, from taking action on discussions at length items not included in the printed agenda. Public comments on specific agenda items will be deferred until consideration of the items on that agenda. As I see, I don't look like I have any public comments. All right. Commissioners' comments and reports of meetings attended. Jim.
I attended no meetings since our last meeting.
All right, perfect. Max.
I haven't attended any meetings since our last meeting.
All right, thank you. And Greg.
I have nothing.
All right, nice. Consent calendar, looks like we have none. Items removed from consent calendar for discussion, looks like we have none as well. And then public hearings, it looks like we have none. Discussion of potential action items. None. All right. We'll move on to the study session.
All right.
Looks like we have one.
We have one, yeah.
Yes, finally.
Yeah, that's tonight's main premiere for the agenda. So I wanted to basically circle back with you all because we now have a complete document, right? We've been working for the last, really, if you can count all the original study sessions, almost 2 years now. But certainly within the last year on different bits and pieces, and so we're starting to pull it all together, and we now have a complete document for your review. Before we start, I just want to let you know this is not how it will be printed. It will be printed front to back, obviously, with the binder on the side, because the way it's designed is when you lay it out, the 2 pages kind of work together. There might be text on one side and a map on the other side. So for now, this is what you've got to review, as well as the electronic version. So I'm going to go really quickly through the first half of the document because it's really reiterating a lot of what was talked about before, a lot of what was decided before in our meetings and our workshops. On the boards, these boards are from our last workshop. There's nothing new there. And focus on the new material that's been added. So there's 4 parts to this plan. Part 1, background and vision. Part 2 is the plan elements. And then the new part is the action plan, part 3, and then part 4 is the downtown code. So that is really kind of the meat of the plan is the code and how we would, review projects going forward. So I'll zip through part 1 and 2, and then I'll slow down a little bit for part 3 and 4. So just a little bit, again, reminders, background, and vision. First chapter is really just kind of an overview, giving a little bit of history, kind of how we got here, talking about the region, and capturing some of the employment growth as well as visitor growth. Talk about the plan and its relation to other plans, including, the general plan and the development code. It goes into the planning process that we went through, including all the public hearings, the study sessions, as well as the workshops and the surveys. Talk about the context, again, how it relates to other plans, including what's been recently accomplished with Project Phoenix. You've seen this before we started, we kind of mapped out the typology of what was already existing downtown, and that kind of helped set the stage for how we wanted to organize our plan. We looked at where there were deficiencies and things to improve upon. We looked at traffic studies, injuries and fatalities and where they were located downtown, actual speeds versus posted speeds downtown and how no one really is following the posted speeds. And then we moved into the vision and goals. So this is the really high level, 40,000 foot, here's kind of our vision of downtown. And basically it sums up in this statement that we want to be the center of Morongo Basin's culture and experiences, that's what our downtown would be. We have the 3 themes that we talked about before, the 3 C's I call them, which is the collaborative nature of downtown, the connectedness of downtown, and that's not just the physical connections that we're creating, starting with Project Phoenix, but also social connections, and then the catalyzing. So that's the business component, the entrepreneurship of downtown, and what we're trying to do there with enhancing the business climate. It then goes into the workshops, describes the workshops that we had, including the surveys, web surveys, and the votes at the workshops, what people preferred. And talked about a little bit of strategy. So sometimes you can, your plan can be so restrictive that it ends up kind of thwarting growth and jobs. But if it's not restrictive enough, there might be a short-term gain, but a long-term loss, depending on the type and quality of development that you permit. We also began to look at our economic forecast for downtown, what's actually possible to develop downtown, given the land that's available, given the constraints that we have right now with lack of sewer over most of it. So we took an optimistic approach, but realistic. So it wasn't the max. We didn't go in and max out every zoning district downtown and build the most square footage or the most units, but we were more on the optimistic side and projecting. Talk about the alternatives that were selected in each of the surveys. Everyone did like the idea of these community corridors. The precedent was set with Project Phoenix and the Paseo that we have started there. Like the idea of carrying that through Adobe Road, and then also being able to make connections to our future Channel Trail as well. So that's really kind of the main driver of the physical organization of downtown, is these connections. So that is a plan for Route 62 corridor, again building on the Paseo that we have there now and extending it to the west. And then also Adobe Road, using the alley that's there on the west side behind the structures, and doing something similar, probably not quite as grand as Route 62, because there's a lot of utility lines and things like that, but being able to spruce it up and turning it into a corridor as well. We talked about the roads and what people preferred there, and this term road diet is used quite a lot in planning circles right now. And that was the preference to take the 4-lane road and turn it into a 3-lane road, essentially, so that you have 2 travel lanes along with a turn lane in the middle for both Adobe and Route 62. That allows you to narrow the road a little bit. That helps control the speeds, but also allows you to expand the sidewalks in certain areas, as well as accommodate at least a Class 2 bike path. So that was generally the approach of the vote. You can see kind of overwhelmingly what most people favored. Then we get into the land use elements, looking at downtown, kind of sort of coordinate off into like different sections, like Civic Center and the sort of heart of where Project Phoenix is, another at Adobe Road, and looked at what each of those are capable of producing as far as new development, new businesses, new construction. And came up with, again, this total square footage that you see here in this chart. And then that also helped drive our land use strategy with the zoning district. So in the end, we ended up at 4 zones. The downtown traditional, which essentially is the heart of our downtown, that really classic traditional storefront architecture where the building is up next to the street. You've got a very walkable section of the city, and just trying to maintain that and hopefully expand upon it. But at the same time recognizing that we got more suburban type development on the edges. That's the downtown general, and then the 2 residential districts. And those essentially mimic what we have now in our code. So there weren't overall, while we have new names of these zoning districts, there weren't overall major changes. Kind of the only 2 really, I wouldn't call big, but there are only sort of 2 places there behind City Hall. That's where we have the area that switched from public to residential. So for our future affordable housing project, a little section here along Split Rock went from residential to commercial. There are currently offices there. There's a church there. That just kind of makes sense. And then just a tiny little portion here south of 62. It's got 1 structure on it, and it was kind of in that no man's land between downtown specific plan and the plan before, and so we just essentially closed that gap and made it, moved it from residential to commercial because it had a commercial structure on it. So those were really the 3 changes. There's a little section that talk about the different projects, such as adding conference facilities to the community center, potential workforce housing in area within Project Phoenix near Cactus, potential mixed-use development on Choya, some other strategies like lot merging to create some larger lots so that they're a little bit more developable, and then Adobe Road as well. So some projects there were discussed. And then get on to the infrastructure side of things. So on the connectivity and mobility, again, this really reflects the vote that Route 62 from Split Rock to Adobe would have that more pedestrian focus, and Adobe Road from Route 62 up to a little past Gorgonia would also have that pedestrian focus. So that's where we would see kind of the major improvements in the streets, and then kind of outlining some of the other transportation networks such as the paths and other side streets that we would like to see improvements on. And then some of those projects, one that we're in the current planning stages is the Future Transit Center, are in the property purchase stage there. Channel Trail is in the 2nd round with flow control. So hopefully there won't be a 3rd round. But it continues to make its way through the approval process. We're hoping again that we can start that, I want to say spring, but we'll see. Split Rock Bridge, still in the approval process with Caltrans, mostly done there, but now it's awaiting funding. And then, of course, the other improvements that we talked about with the streets, more long-term. Parking strategy, just to remind you there a little bit on this. Our goal, our strategy here was to try to create enough parking within the one block area of essentially that core of downtown, really the downtown traditional, to handle all of the parking needs within that area so that you're not walking more than a block. That was the strategy. And I think for the most part that will work. We're coming up with around a little over 1,000 spaces needed on the demand side, and then with the development of these parking lots, we will have 1,000 spaces provided. Also, as you know, especially in the downtown traditional, we're using that shared parking approach, where we are creating public parking lots to serve multiple businesses. That's more efficient on a lot of levels. Number one, by combining the parking area serve the businesses, you get more spaces, you can landscape them better, you can provide better ADA access across them. There's lots of benefits from a shared parking strategy. And kind of how that works in reality is kind of the different types of businesses that you have downtown have their peaks as far as when people are actually showing up. So for example, restaurants peak a little bit at lunch, but especially in the evening. That's when they're parking. Retail, kind of late morning around lunch and early afternoon is when they're peaking. Lodging, hotels, early in the morning, kind of a slowdown during the day, and then back in the evening. Office, late morning, peaking. So even though we have these multiple uses, they're peaking at different times, and so they're sharing that parking space, again, far better than a single purpose lot would for a particular business. Some landscaping plans and the framework there. Of course, we've talked a little bit about Route 62 and Adobe as other strategies are proposed, such as improving a Cactus and Joshua, and then up at Buena Vista along, adjacent to the Channel Trail, kind of gateways into downtown. A little bit more detailed on what that road diet would look like for Route 62. So again, narrowing that road, not much in the sense of where the curb lines are now, but we would be able to neck out the edges of the road where the side roads are, perhaps put larger seating area, shaded seating area there in the block, mid-block, keeping the parallel parking and actually enhancing it on the north side than what we have now, and installing the left turn lane, with the raised median. So that's what, is in essence, the road diet gets us. I did have discussions with council about the roundabout here. Couldn't get a strong sense one way or the other. I think the idea now is let's see what Caltrans has to say. They may not want to support the idea at all, and so in the plan, we have the option here of going back to a signalized intersection at Split Rock if that's the case. But the idea there is, with the roundabout, it slows traffic without stopping it, actually improves safety, improves vehicular safety and pedestrian safety. One thing I've heard since I came to 29 is we don't want to be like Yucca Valley, where you have stoplights from one end to the other. And so this is an alternative to a signalized intersection, and we'll have to see how, what Caltrans thinks about it. It certainly is consistent with their philosophy and their the direction that they're going in policy, but we deal with District 8, which is a whole different beast here. We did come up with some conceptual designs on what maybe the neckouts along 62 would look like, little places for people to sit, shaded, and then the potential to add some shaded areas on the Paseo down the road. We have planted a lot of trees there, which will mature over time, but there are sections where we could come back and look at some sort of physical shaded structure that might be more permanent. And please stop me at any point if you have questions. Adobe Road, similar strategy. Again, the road diet, sort of the 3 lanes, not quite as many raised medians here, given all the curb cuts that we've got. But in this instance, really kind of adding that extra road space to the west side of Adobe, where we have, again, more of that downtown traditional pattern of development, and expanding it, perhaps putting a double row of trees there, more area that they could do outdoor seating and outdoor dining in that location. So very, very similar concepts for both roads. And then we have the sections. Again, another image of what the alley off of Adobe Road could look like. Kind of called it an art walk in this diagram. And then a little bit on the infrastructure, looking at resiliency, along with the utilities, potential future charging stations that we might have. Actually spent almost a day trying to get our charging stations in Project Phoenix online, so they're close, not there yet, but we will soon have 3 fast chargers in Project Phoenix, and then we've got the dual slower AC charger on the way. It was a little bit delayed. Thinking again about the future. We did do a wastewater analysis for all of downtown. If it was sewered publicly, how many gallons per day would we be generating downtown? Okay, and so that leads me to, that was really quick, I know, but just kind of a brief of kind of what got us here today. So now I'd like to switch over to part 3 and 4, because this is essentially the new material. Part 3 is really short. We talk about some strategies to help with economic competitiveness downtown, and a lot of ideas that, you know, how we can look to improve the business climate beyond what we're already doing. Actually, one of the things I was going to mention in my reports, but I'll say it now, is the business improvement loan program that the city council has passed. So we're actually off to a really good start there. We have 3 projects that have been approved, and construction is already underway on those. We have 3 more that we'll be submitting, and then I have at least 3 more that we're beginning initial conversations with. So, you know, the whole point of a lot of this public investment is to also spur investment on the private side to complement it, and so that they're also improving the appearance of their buildings, enhancing their businesses, and so that's off to a pretty good start. Some other ideas here, you know, beyond the standard of creating brochures and creating liaisons and things like that, but maybe at some point in the future we work up to what's called a business improvement district, and you'll see these established in some cities, typically larger ones, but also some smaller ones do. Like I know certainly Palm Springs has one. I believe Palm Desert has one. And essentially, it's an extra fee or tax within that area, and that helps fund a BID, Business Improvement District. And that BID, the funds from that are then decided on, you know, how to use by the folks that are part of the Business Improvement District. So very similar to the TBID, you know, Tourist Business Improvement District that we have. They essentially tax the rooms, I think 1.5%, and all of those funds go into a pot, and then the TBID decides how to fund it. So it could be used for things like hosting events. It could be extra funds for, you know, sort of extra cleaning services downtown. Some cities have like an ambassador there to greet people, help them, you know, get directions and things like that. There's a number of things that could be spent on. And then the actual action plan. So we didn't want to just say, here's a bunch of ideas and leave it to the next community development manager to figure out how to implement them, but to actually get started on implementing them right away. So that's what the reason for creating essentially the schedule in mostly 5-year blocks, where we look at all the projects that we've talked about throughout the plan, and potentially, you know, when they make sense to get going in the time frame over the next 20 to 25 years. And remember that it's a long-term plan. A lot of it is depending on funding. So some of these projects may actually move up if, say, more infrastructure funds become available to the city. Some of them may actually move down the pipe a little bit. So a lot of it is dependent on funding. But you know, some of the things that we're working on right away is we're already talking about certainly the housing, affordable housing project, and beginning the initial stages of planning on that. The Paseo West extension, I will call it. In the interim, we want to do some improvements, you know, to that lot. Won't be the ultimate, but just at least cleaning it up a little bit, maybe a bit of slurry on top, that sort of thing, while we look at designing, you know, the more permanent improvements. Paseo West extension and other upgrades. Talked about the community affordable housing there. So this basically lays out, you know, the different projects and when they would likely occur over the next 20, 25 years. And now the heart of the plan. So this is the code. So, you know, the thing about a specific plan is it's almost like a general plan and a development code in one document. So you've got, you know, everything in one document. And in the hierarchy of things, your specific plan, kind of while at the lowest level, really takes precedent as far as detail. So if there's a conflict between, you know, the development code and the specific plan essentially overrides, and the same with the general plan. So codes almost always start with a land use table. So this is what we have currently in the plan, and I would, you know, ask you, if you are going to focus on anything, you know, focus on these. We did try to write them broadly so that we don't get into kind of very defined interpretations like we did with, say, the axe throwing, you know. In our development code, that was not something that was specifically listed. Nobody thought about axe throwing, you know, 10 years ago that would be a thing, but now it is. So, you know, now when we write it, we say, you know, residential and fitness indoors, residential fitness outdoors. So we try to write it broad, so things like that aren't having to go through, you know, a whole separate process. Same type of different approvals there. It's either it's not permitted, it is permitted with our P. It's permitted, but it goes through an administrative use permit, so that's a staff level review. And the CUP, conditional use permit, that's, of course, comes before you guys. So that's, in essence, an entitlement of sorts. So take a look at that table. These are all really important because they will differ a little bit from the standard development code. You know, when you're talking about your downtown, you don't necessarily want things like heavy industry and things like that downtown, which just don't complement the uses that are there. So those tables, again, we brought back the zoning map, simplifying things, going from 5 zones down to 4. And then the development standards. So these are the standards that go with each of the zones. And as you'll recall, when we talked about the downtown traditional, we're really changing those standards. So we're not including a front yard setback of 25 feet. We want the buildings to be up close to the street. We want the buildings to be almost touching on the side if they can. There is a provision here that if you have residential on one side, you leave 5 feet distance between the residential. We're increasing the FAR, what's called the floor area ratio, so you can build you know, a little bit more intensely. And we have, for example, we have several buildings downtown which almost cover the entire lot. Well, that's a FAR of 1.0 because it's 100%. So little things like that are there as far as standards go. And then talking about additional things that go with it, you know, sort of how you apply the setbacks, fences and screening, screening of mechanical equipment, Parking, again, remember downtown traditional, we are not requiring parking. Most of that is served by public, with the sole exception for residential areas. So if you've got residential, we still want you to provide a parking space. We feel like that's, if left to just public parking, that would be problematic. Landscaping, even including providing for bicycle pedestrian facilities as well, something we're not currently doing in our existing code. More landscaping, signage and graphics, both public side as well as private side. Public art, there's now a public art requirement for downtown, so that could be, you know, a piece of public art that the owner is installing, or they could contribute into a fund, very, very low percentage, but they could contribute into a fund. And then lighting, this chapter was greatly reduced. Originally, the consultant had about 4 or 5 pages on lighting, and it was just really technical. We got into lumens and foot candles, and we don't have the staff here that could apply it. Certainly, a lot of our property owners wouldn't be able to understand it. So we went a very simple route, and that is that any new lighting be dark sky approved. And that's what we're doing in Project Phoenix, and it seems like it's working well. So that's what we would carry through. And that greatly, greatly simplifies the administration of this document. Architecture, you know, quite a bit there, but remember, these are guidelines. So that first part was standards, these are guidelines. So we have not gone the Santa Barbara route where we're dictating, you know, stucco finishes and colors and everything like that. What we are trying to do is give folks a range of options that fit in with the desert. And we took what we had talked about really almost 2 years ago and kind of enhanced it and added to it. So we ended up with the 4 styles, the high desert Adobe style, which is most prevalent here in the desert. And then, you know, more information about that. The Spanish mission style, which we have some, you know, good examples, but in the city, but not quite as prevalent. And then what we're calling the desert modern style. You might want to say that mid-century and mid-century sort of enhanced. And then last but not least, the frontier style. But without trying to make it cartoonish looking. So that's where we ended up with the 4 styles. And you know, while this is a downtown plan, we've been trying to encourage this throughout the city with other developments and other projects. And then kind of the last section here has to do with form and massing. Heard loud and clear what you've been saying about don't bring us a box kind of thing. And so that's what this section is getting into, that we mass the buildings in such a way you can do indentions in the building, you know, protrusions in the building, different setbacks at different levels, but all of these things go to creating something that's not a box. So you have several pages that deal specifically with that, how you dress corners, all of that. I tell you, we've been lucky in that a lot of the projects that we work with recently have jumped on board. I'm dealing with a couple right now that are a little bit more resilient, and we still want to provide a box because that's what the corporate standard is. And so we're like, you can still do your box, but just put a nice skin on it and dress it up a little bit so that it fits in with the desert. That's what we're trying to encourage. It gets into more detail, materials, again, lighting, trying to prevent trespass, signage and graphics and placement of those, windows and doors as well, shop front designs. So again, kind of a whole host of guidelines that are really meant to deliver a quality project that fits in with the character of downtown. And that's kind of it. So that's the complete document. I have done a thorough read through. I just in flipping, I see some corrections that still need to be made. But we'll do another final read-through. And then if you guys are okay with it, we would like to start the public hearing process for adoption.
Yeah, I did see one error on the page prior to this one. So under my name, yeah, right there, it's DICKSON versus DIXON. That's the most important part. Everything else looks great. So hopefully these haven't been mass produced yet.
No, it has not.
Okay.
You got the only copies.
Perfect.
We'll shred them afterwards.
No, it looks good, Travis. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Any comments from the commission?
I do have a question, just because I was asked this yesterday specifically.
Okay.
In the allowable use, or land use for downtown,
Mm-hmm.
adult-oriented businesses for the two, to be a CUP,
Yeah, that should be X
all the way through?
all the way through.
Yeah.
That was one thing that did not get changed.
Yeah, the general plan has them in industrial areas.
Yeah, why don't I understand?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, I specifically recall making that change.
I remember that, we had to zone some area for that.
Yeah, we
We
could,
did industrial,
yeah.
commercial industrial, we had set for that, not downtown.
Yeah. I was asked why there isn't any strip clubs around Marine Bay. Well, the city doesn't have the proper, the big zoning to have them.
Well, we do, but you
But-
industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right here, gotcha. All right, yeah, I'm certain that my edits had that taken out.
That was the only thing I've seen that caught my eye.
Okay, that's a good catch.
No, the only thing I would add is having seen the previous downtown specific plan, this thing is head and shoulders above that. And, I don't know when we publish this thing, I don't know, some people are gonna look at we have packages of examples of what the buildings are, and some people are gonna read through that and go, well, where's that place?
Right.
Yeah, so I
Right.
hope they read the captions underneath, you know.
They do, and
That,
so,
those are examples of the buildings that we're looking at.
yeah, and when the consultant was putting this together, originally it was examples from all over. And I said, okay, for Adobe, it's okay to use an example from Santa Fe, but include one here locally in 29 Palms, which is, of course, the art gallery. And I had them do that throughout. Mission style, yeah, but hey, we've got a great example right across the street of, mission style. So
You listed Joshua Tree Saloon as being from that Falls.
close by. But it's a local example of frontier architecture.
Minor things.
Yeah. So if you guys are okay, then we'll look to bring it back March 1st for our public hearing. If we're good to go, we can pass it. It goes straight to city council. Can't do March 1st.
We didn't have noticed it, we don't have time to notice.
Oh, we're beyond our 10 days.
The notice would have to be in tomorrow's paper.
Kurt's sitting there?
Paper.
Oh, I know.
Okay. It would be April or a separate meeting that we would have to set up. Yeah, we may have to set up a separate meeting. One of the reasons why we want to move forward is the affordable housing site. So, right now, that's zoned public, it's not zoned residential. Developers, as you can imagine, would like for the property to be zoned for the intended use. And so we really want to move forward so we can get that project going. We're trying to hit certain cycles for these tax exempt bonds and loans and grants, and it's yearly cycles with these things. So if you miss this year, then your next year, you miss next year, and it's the following year. So we'll look at the calendar. We've had a lot of changes in the calendar here just within the last day, so we'll take a look at that.
All right.
Any other comments?
Well, we got these yesterday.
shoot, if it's things like, you know.
Minor,
Yeah, just shoot me an email and we'll get that incorporated. If it's a policy thing, then, you know, let's discuss it back with the planning commission.
All right, anything else?
Well, I gotta tell you, you hit about 95% of what I wanted.
I'll take that as a compliment.
You should.
All right.
I think it's very well done.
All right, we'll move on to Community Development Director updates.
Okay, so I will keep it brief, even though, been pretty brief, well,
Yeah,
okay,
we're
one
doing
at a
good.
time, maybe not quite as brief as. So as I said, we'll get back to you on the calendar here. Things are quite in flux. I did want to mention the housing element because that feeds back into this discussion here. We did have our conversations with the state housing community development on the housing element that we had submitted, and overall there was not a lot of comments. I mean, they're pretty happy with the product that we produced. They did have one issue that they were essentially saying that we need to take another look at, and that's kind of their way of saying if you want your housing element approved. And that is housing, especially multifamily housing, where the state is going, and again, because there is such demand for housing and crunch from housing, they're trying to remove as many barriers as possible to housing, especially multifamily housing. And that means remove making it a discretionary approval. So within our current code, housing of a certain number is either a CUP or AUP, and they want that eliminated. If it's zoned for housing, if it's multifamily housing, it's zoned for that, it should not be a discretionary approval. We should be allowing it. We can still have reviews for site plan and design, but we can't just arbitrarily say, no, we're not going to approve that project, you know, because we just don't like it, when it's a housing project in a area zone for housing. So here's what we proffered back to them. I don't know that they would accept it, but here's what we proffered back. Right now, if it's 25 units or below, it's an AUP, and I believe it's 25 more, it becomes a CUP. So we said, look, we'll remove the CUP and AUP from, you know, all the zoning districts. But, you know, we still want to have some kind of review, especially if it's a larger housing project from the planning commission. Because we always try to be transparent here, always try to bring you new development, you know, even when technically, you know, might be a AUP. So we proffered that if it's under 50 units, that it would be a staff review. We would look at site plan and design. If it's 50 or more units, it would come to the planning commission for site plan and design approval only, not a CUP. So just want to let you guys know that that's what we responded back to them. Haven't heard back whether that's acceptable or not. But, you know, given the housing crunch, they are trying to remove really as many barriers as possible that local governments can throw in the way of or prevent housing from moving forward.
50 plus units?
Yeah.
Site plan review?
Site plan and design review by the planning commission. And so what this will mean, and actually we have a couple, the smaller ones which meet the current code, you're gonna see housing projects pop up within town. And, you know, well, why didn't we see that? That's gonna be the reasons why, because it's small enough that it meets the exemptions from coming to you. And then while I'm on the housing topic, I just want to kind of set the record straight on some misinformation that's out there, especially in the social media world, about why we moved the affordable housing to the site by City Hall. And there's several reasons. The most prominent one is it's a larger site. It's 3 acres versus 1.8 acres. So you can build more houses on 3 acres, and you can, you know, spread them out a little bit more. So that's the number one. Then number two, proximity to services. So you've got county social services here, you've got the library, we've got City Hall, we have a sheriff's office here. So all of these services would literally be within walking distance of the housing project. They would not even have to cross the street. Number three, it's adjacent to a park. You know, grass and trees, and so families could go out there and enjoy the park. You would not have that downtown. And, you know, with that comes just kind of a quieter area, less traffic, less noise. It would be adjacent to multifamily residential that we already have to the north here, and then the link to the schools to the west. So there's a multitude of reasons why, you know, this site here behind City Hall makes a lot more sense for affordable housing. The other thing is we own the land, so that's free. So some of our housing bond money can then be freed up to actually make improvements. And, you know, the cost of land is not an issue. So all this, of course, has to be worked out with the developer, but I just wanted to kind of iterate that. And then I already talked about the renovations going downtown. If you haven't been downtown, you'll see 3 or 4 buildings already underway, being improved. We got some more that are going to be starting really soon, like within the next week or so. So hopefully this snowballs and we'll see, you know, the improvements throughout.
Which ones are they?
So what used to be the old Mojave Moon,
Yes.
and 3 or 4 buildings right next to that, that's 2 properties. And then next to that is where the old Bistro 29 was, that's started. The Virginian has already started on some of their improvements with the stucco and the paint. And then the old Market Basket building will be coming in for renovation, opening up the windows, which have been boarded up for many, many years. So that's another project. And then I'm working with Mr. Briggs on his property too, next to the plaza. So those are the ones that we're actively engaged with. And then finally, the VHR meeting, I was going to ask that, you know, when is it coming back to you guys? We're trying to juggle, again, lots of things here. You know, staff availability over the next few weeks being key. A venue to have, you know, this meeting, because given the meeting with City Council, I don't think this room can hold all the people, all the voices that we would have before and against any change to the code. So right now, we're looking at potentially, I'll say potentially right now, March 2nd, that's a Wednesday, and it would be at Patriotic Hall. The other thing we're running into is our recreational facilities are all full. So both the Lucky Park Activity Center is booked up. The new multipurpose room / gymnasium and Project Phoenix is actually booked through the end of March. So the recreational facilities that are big enough to hold this are all full. So right now, we're looking at Patriotic Hall, March 2nd on Wednesday, if that's a date. No, that would be a public hearing to consider the changes to the vacation home rental ordinance. You don't think we have enough time? Okay. All right.
I mean, wouldn't that be a presentation to this, a presentation to the Planning Commission of what the committee recommends?
Yeah.
And then a discussion amongst us. We're not gonna make decisions or what?
You could, you know, because what the committee has done is they have taken the existing code and they
I know.
have documented the
Got it.
changes.
Well, there was some suggestions made that needed much more vetting.
Right. So
Yeah.
there are a few things that the committee punted on
Yes.
to the planning commission. So those would have to be discussed as well. So it would be up to you all. It could be done in one meeting. If it takes several meetings, that's okay too.
I would at least like to study session.
You want to start with the
Yeah.
study session first?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if it's a study session, that does not have to be advertised. We could do it on the first, yeah.
I have a question, because if all
We
of
probably
that-
would still need a bigger venue, though. I think I'm just a little
No, but
concerned
yes.
about the tightness of this room.
There'll be people that wanna come.
Yeah.
Because of all of the applicants, there's a little scuttlebutt going on out in the public and all that. I've given a lot of questions about that. What's going on with this? How long will
It's at least 2 months, 'cause you,
They just gotta go to city council, be advertised for 30 days, and then come back to city council before they
For
can.
a final reading.
yeah, second reading,
And then it goes into effect 30 days after the final reading.
right,
So we're looking at 2 to 3 months.
yeah, at least. And that's really it. You know, I kind of usually start with Project Phoenix, but we're still doing the final touches on it. And literally the final touches, so like the new street poles, street sign poles that we put up, do not have a final on top. It's like, okay, your street sign should have a final on top, and then making, streets, fabricating the street signs over in Public Works, for the renamed streets that we now have, Freedom Way and, Paseo de Mara and all that.
Do you know what the
So-
schedule is for the package plant that's gonna handle the wastewater issues along there?
Still, working on that now, doing, the discussions with the tribes right now, for that, and the monitoring. We hope that that will get, underway in the summer this year.
I do have a comment, kind of a peeve.
Okay?
When they put the signs up, re-put them up, can they make sure the damn poles are straight? It really looks tacky when your poles are,
You're not talking about the ones in Project Phoenix, so.
I'm talking about all over town.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I make sure the ones in Project Phoenix are proper.
Yep, we used, the leveler on all of those.
And then, of course, another question I'm getting is any more word on our, shipping container motel that's going on across from the.
The next step, they have not submitted for building and safety.
Okay.
So still waiting on that. There is a, tentative parcel map that would need to go to city council, for their approval. Essentially, they're combining everything into one big lot, which in our language is a parcel merger and is a staff level review. But in this instance, because there's a public right-of-way involved that's getting abandoned, that needs to go, before city council. There's also another tentative parcel map for Project Phoenix, which needs to come, before city council as well. Again, we're merging lots, a whole lot of the 7,200 square foot lots into larger single lots. But again, because right-of-way is involved in public streets and alleys, it goes to city council. That's all I have.
All right.
I didn't bore you too much.
No, thank you very much, Travis. Appreciate it. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, with that, I guess we will adjourn this meeting. All right. Look at that.
I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah.
What was the 5%?
Now the neighbors don't wanna see it.
The more traditional buildings. Yes, we have some, but it's very minor. There's a lot of buildings that do not look like.
All right. We'll see ya.